Magnus Carlsen is known for playing forever. One of his best skills is that he just keeps playing. He just keeps going. You are going to see an opening idea pay off. We're going to see a very imbalanced middle game and one of the longest World Championship matches of all time. Carlsen has white, Nepo has black. d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, and g3, e6. Bishop g2, bishop e7, and both sides castle. We have the Catalan. So, what is it? The Catalan setup is d4, knight f3, bishop g2, castle. White can get in c4 later, which we're going to see very soon. Black sets up in this very sensible way. Knight, e6, d5, bishop, and castle. Now what? Carlsen now mixes it up, because in game 2, he didn't really get an advantage. It was such a messy game. b3. The point of this is to prepare c4. Nepo now strikes in the center with c5. Take, take, and c4. The whole point of this pawn break, this c4 move, is to open up the diagonal for the Catalan bishop. Nepo allows this opening because after this capture, really he wants to go for a queen trade. And Carlsen says no. With this move, queen c2, you pin, so you cannot take, you lose your bishop. With this option, Carlsen actually keeps queens on. Nepo was hoping for this. Take, 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 even though this bishop is open. Now you block the diagonal. The point is, the queens are now off. Perhaps white does not have an advantage here. Carlsen goes for queen c2 straight away. Queen e7. And that's the amazing thing. Already, I'm speechless. It's absolutely amazing. This position is fresh. Brand new. Knight d2 was played. I was just thinking queen c4, get your pawn back and then develop normally. Knight here, bishop here. Knight d2 was played. The cool thing is, the interesting psychological matter is, Nepo didn't take the pawn. He just got his pieces out with knight c6. What happens if this capture takes place? Take. An opening idea paying off. That's what I mentioned at the start of the video. That's what I'm talking about. Carlsen sacks a b pawn. If the bishop goes back here, a4 is so strong. The bishop is coming out to a3, hitting the queen, and already this is so dangerous for black. That's why bishop d6 is much better, just to stop bishop a3. But now knight a5 is a cool idea. The rook can come to b1 to pressure b7. This knight can come out of the way. This diagonal can open up for the Catalan bishop. So I believe this is one of Carlsen's idea. I'm just saying that because checking the first line stockfish, you put the knight on a5. Because I'm thinking, what's the point of sacking the pawn? There's got to be an idea. Back to the game. Knight d2 played. Knight c6, knight c4. Controlling e5. Very sharp move here. b5. Wow, what a strike. Remember a few moves ago I'm mentioning about opening up the Catalan bishop? Well, that's exactly what happened. That's the funny thing. But it's a very forceful continuation. You're not going to play e5 here unless you know it. Nepo is fearing some of Carlsen's preparation. e5 is exactly what Carlsen wants psychologically because you're giving him a target. Bishop e2. It's move 12. You push your pawn to e5. It looks good because you're controlling a central square, but it's a target. e4 and knight g5. Here we go. Fearing his preparation. This just looks so dangerous. 3 are on this. Bishop f6 removes the defender to one of them. Bishop f5 is one way to continue, and knight e3, and it's just another way to play. I really like white's position here. But Nepo went for b5. Knight e5, knight b4. Can't take, no way. If you take, you lose. You lose so much. If you move the rook, knight c6 wins everything. You're going to pick up the rook. The queen still needs to defend the bishop. The queen attacks that bishop. No, you can't do this. If you block with a knight, then you can actually play the knight to c6 anyway, and then go e4, which is an absolutely brilliant move. Take. And if you take, then there's this brilliant move, bishop a3. Using the pin, you're going to win the bishop. Absolutely brilliant move here. If you capture bishop a3, winning. So you can't go for this. Nepo goes for knight b4, hitting the queen. Queen goes to b2. It would be really nice if queen can come to c3. That's why I drew this green arrow. Bishop comes to b2. We're lining it up facing king. But the problem is you're going to get hit with knight e4. Hit the queen. The queen moves back. Bishop e7. Black has completed the development. all the minor pieces out. With the queen, healthy pawn structure. By healthy here, I mean symmetrical. Chances of winning have been reduced. Queen back to b2. Queen to b2, I mean. But this is a perfect position. Carlsen needs some sort of imbalance. And I'm not talking about the pawn structure, about the placement of the pieces. It's imbalance. Definitely. Bishop comes out to b7, a3, attack the knight. No way do you play this trade. Couple of bishops slicing the board. Black is completely fine. So if you go back 2 moves, after knight c6, you've got to keep the knight. Drop it back, keep the pieces on. This is what I call the Catalan Knight. I think a lot of top players call it that. Normally, there's a knight on that square when the knight retreats to e1 and then d3, controlling the central squares, c5 and e5. The funny thing here is Carlsen has played this knight to d2, c4, e5. It's come back to d3. I've never seen this before. Knight back to d3, attack the bishop. Bishop comes back to b6. Normally, in these kind of structures, this bishop is a problem. But Nepo's got the bishop out to b7. Looking at White's position, the funny thing is, he's got the problem. Where are you even going to put this bishop? And Carlsen pins the knight straight away. Rook d8. Doubles the pawns, and now goes rook c1. It really is about fighting for control. Queen attacks f6, queen e7 attacks a3. So the queens attack each other's pawns. Knight d4, Nepo goes for a trade. One option was a5, getting more space, but now b4. And it's very important in this kind of position to take. If you go a4, this is such a bad position for White. I mean, just a couple moves, couple pawn moves, it's not great. The reason this is so bad is now this square belongs to White. Knight c5. It's so dangerous. Take. And White is coming through. You attack the pawn, the rooks can double, this knight can move out the way, the Catalan bishop is in the game. So we can't go for this. So a5 was one option I was thinking, because when I look at this position, I don't really think that Black needs to swap. You can play a useful move, and why not get a pawn up the board to control the squares. After a5, if b4, you're fighting for control of a key square on the queen side. c5, take. Here, take. Rook a4 is a target. However, Nepo went for a trade, fair enough. Black is not worse, man. Black is not worse. Take. Couple of bishops slicing the board here, I mean. Take. You need to defend a3, so queen a2 played by Carlsen. The Catalan bishop now comes off. Take. Thrown a check. Queen b7. Don't want to go for f3. Looks a bit discouraging. I know you stopped the queen coming out from e4, but bishop e3. I mean, this bishop is wonderful. So you don't want to go for that. King drops back and queen e4. Queen looks menacing on e4, but it's attacking pawn that's being defended, so looks deceiving. I mean, so what if there's a queen on e4? Queen comes closer, back in the game, a5 played, and rook d1. Looks like a couple of rooks are going to be placed on the c and the d files. King g7, rook d2 played. And one option, instead of rook c8, going for 2 rooks for a queen, which we're going to see very soon. Take. What actually happened was b4. Sorry, what could have happened was b4, just controlling a dark square. If you go a4, this is so dangerous. This idea was not created by Nepo. Putting a bishop on a dark square, this was one option. And b4, you may have been thinking, knight and pawn attack it. Take. What happens now? Bishop takes f2 check is the nice way to get your pawn back. After this, 4 pawns each. It could be a draw. Very likely to be a draw. So b4 was possible, but Nepo went for this clarification. This transition, I mean. 2 rooks for the queen. Take. Now what? Queen d5. You attack b3 and defend your pawn on b5. b4 gets space. a4 lock it up. Nepo has chosen to fix the structure on the queen side, making these pawns potential targets. e3 played, kick the bishop out to e5, and now h4. Notice what Carlsen's done. He's put lots of pawns on dark squares. h5 played. King h2 and bishop b2. If you play rook b2, queen d3, you might go rook a2 and then defend like this, but then I don't think black is ever worse. One option was to kick the queen out of the way, which is exactly what happened in the game. After bishop b2, using this tactic, you don't want to go for this. The advantage is dying, out for white. Rook c5 was played. The queen moves out the way, and now rook back to d1, because now Carlsen is threatening to take the bishop, which attacks, which defends the rook. But there's this brilliant move. Rook c back to c2. What's the idea? You give up your pawns on the queen side. The pawns that Nepo fixed are now targets. They all fall. If you take, knight f4 is the idea. Rook defends rook. Things are collapsing. Look out for this capture on e6. If the queen moves out the way, let's say to b4, rook d7. Couple of pawns. On the queen side, this just looks too scary. Rook d7. Knight e6 check is coming, so if queen b1, rook c7, that pawn is going to fall. And something like this, if you march your pawns up, it's mate. Check. We really need that bishop to come back as a defender. Check. Rook can come back, and it is mate. Crazy. So difficult to just give up your 2 pawns on the queen side to start an attack yourself. Knight f4. If queen f8, rook d7. This is the idea. If bishop here, knight e6 check, you're going to pick up the queen using the pin along the 7th rank. King back, rook c7. Threatening to win the queen, fair enough. Check, check, and rook c7. Couple of rooks. Going for a mating attack, the knight is in. Still a couple of pawns, looks very dangerous. Check, push, and rook c2, something like this. You flush the king out, this is a passed pawn. This is actually faster than black's couple. You attack this, but then you defend along the 2nd rank through an x-ray. White is completely winning. However, in the game, rook d1 was played, bishop a3, rook b5. Now, 1 pawn each on the queen side. Queen d7, attack the rook, rook c5, and now e5, rook back to c2, and queen d5. 1 minute for white, 2 minutes for black. Queen d5 is a blunder because Nepo missed his shot just to pick up the pawn using the pin on the d file. Both players are in time trouble. It is only when they get to move 40 they both get extra time, 1 hour each back on the clock. Rook needs to go back to c1 to defend the rook. Very important you attack the rook. If you play a move like this, then knight e5 is an idea. Discovered attack, the queen might move back, knight d3. I don't think black's worse here. Black's pawns are absolutely awful. Double isolated here, but there is counterplay. You defend your asset on a3 with the bishop. That's why here, if bishop b4, rook c1, attack the rook moves. There's still this attack with knight e5, but queen g4 is the absolutely brilliant move because you attack the rook. That's the key move, and that's what Nepo missed. So difficult to see. It looks like I'm going to move the bishop because I have to, but then we get this situation with this discovered attack, which I discussed before. Queen moves back, attack the pawn, knight d3, got to come back, defend it. Awful, awful pawns on the king side, but you can push your asset. This is going to be a suitable distraction. Nepo missed it. He only had 2 minutes. Queen d5, rook d2, defending along the rank. Rook a2, e4, mistake, attack the queen, and the funny thing is Carlsen now blunders with knight e4. A lot of pressure. A brilliant move is rook c2, defend the knight from the side. Sorting out, completely sorting out the situation on the queen side. Now the reason knight e4 is a blunder is because now after queen b3 you attack the rook and then the bishop can come back. This is going to be an asset. Black's actually got counterplay. Now one brilliant way to continue was rook c2. Now what's the point of this? This structure, this situation for black is just messed up. There's just no coordination between the queen and the bishop. This bishop, it needs to be all the way back there. I mean, the bishop needs a path all the way on that diagonal. So what's the idea? If f5 you defend, how does white even continue? Brilliant tactical shot here. Knight takes a4. Because after take, rook c3. This is the vital point. The rooks will pick up the bishop. Vital, by the way, this rook defends the pawn. There's no silly stuff. No silly perpetual check. Rook a3. Like I've said before, black's pawns are awful because there's no good pawn break. Nothing. Knight takes e4 play, queen b3, rook c2, bishop comes back, knight c5. No way you're going to go for this. Same problem. That pawn is not going to run down. The rook can always come back. Black's pawns are messed up. So after knight c5, you keep the bishop on, drop the queen back. a3, you protect your assets. Maybe black's doing all right. Queen a5, rook a2 block, and a lot of maneuvering here. Let's get to a new key point. And here we go. This is the new key point. Rook a3. Carlsen now goes for this, giving up the rook for the bishop. But the point is, black's pawns are so messed up. You're going to put your rook here. Let's say these pawns are dropped. I mean, they're not going anywhere. Something's going to drop, e4. Maybe even get the knight to d5. Grab that pawn on f6. There's no way through. That's why if we go back after rook a3, queen h4 check, very cool move, using the pin. Queen comes back, so he's picked up a pawn, and now here we go. Knight e2, you attack the queen. Rook a2, hit the queen, defend the knight through the x-ray on the second rank. King up, right, here we go. f3, block the check, f4, hit the bishop, and here we go. Nepo's created a target on e3. Rook a1, attack the queen. Queen b3, attack this, and gotta defend from the e file. Rook e4. Good move. Rook e8, still defending. And rook a8, creating counterplay on the back. At the same time.
Good night, William.
Good night! Rook c8, a lot of shuffling. Rook c1, right, let's go. Let's go. Where is the next key moment? Hit the bishop. Nepo's strategy, keep the bishop on the pawn, because this is going to give him some counterplay. Hit the bishop again. At the same time, you keep defending e3. Carlsen is going to play forever. Hit the queen, hit the rook, hit the pawn, queen c2, defend the bishop, stop the knight moving, defend this. Rook b5, hit the bishop. Nepo's strategy is clear. Keep the bishop on this diagonal. It's going to be a suitable source of counterplay later. Hit the bishop, take. Now it just looks like black's collapsing. All these pawns are going to drop, but this is the point. Tactic, queen d3. You may be thinking, well, what's the difference? If you go rook e5, this is the point. If you go rook e5, now we have this tactical shot. You take the bishop, that rook drops. It didn't matter which way you did it. Rook e5, same thing, guys. Same thing. Bishop takes e3, check. That's why Carlsen now goes for a fresh, original exchange, because after this he's got to find some way to keep playing. That's what Carlsen does best. He really does keep playing. It's ridiculous. By the way, it's move 79. Queen d3. He goes for this exchange. Sacks the rook to get the bishop and a pawn. So rook takes pawn check, take, check, and then now we get this situation. Rook, knight, 3 pawns against the queen and a pawn. Now let's keep going. Check. A lot of shuffling, guys. A lot of shuffling. We'll get to the key moment soon. Check. Attack the rook and the king. Drop the rook back. And here we go. We keep shuffling. Everything defends everything. That's why Carlsen can keep playing. He just doesn't stop playing because everything defends everything. And then eventually his opponent's going to mess up. Here we go again. Check. Drop the rook back. Hit the rook. Drop. Defend. Pawn defends. Knight defends. Rook, which is defended by the pawn. Here we go. e4. There's the push. It's move 110. Queen h1. Check. And we come back. Nepo offers a trade. It feels like the queen is going to be able to give enough checks. But these 2 pawns are so dangerous. Guide it with the rook, knight, even the king. And there's going to be a way through. Have you ever seen a material imbalance like this? Rook, knight, 2 pawns versus the queen. Let's keep going. How does Carlsen make it through? Cool situation here. Everything defends everything. King, knight, rook, 2 pawns against the queen. Let's keep going. Check, up, right. Here we go. Here we go. When is Carlsen going to get his pawns moving? Another key moment here. Cool moment, I would say. Knight defends rook, which defends both pawns on f4 and e5. Here we go. King defends knight, which defends rook, which defends the 2 pawns. White is the only one trying to win this. Find a way to get the pawns up. You've got a victory coming soon. King up, so then now you can move the knight. Queen h6, check. Knight h5. Carlsen is making serious progress. It is move 132. White is winning. Queen h7, you attack the rook. And the cool thing is, even in the endgame, there are some brilliant tactics. This is just a nice one. You attack the rook. The cool thing is you don't even have to move at e6. Carlsen is really showing his superiority. Can't take the rook. check, you pick up the queen. Queen g6, you attack the pawn, cool move. Can't push, lose it, no. This is a key moment, and Carlsen plays a really cool move. The reason this move is so cool is because it cuts off the king, but it also allows the knight to come in. Rook to f7. Knight g7 check is next, forcing the pawn home. Can't grab this pawn. That's the point of queen e6, by the way, to attack the pawn. But you cut it off in this way. If you grab, we get a one pawn endgame. After this complete mess, it transitions into a pawn endgame. The purest of endgames, you could say, because it's all calculation. Check. Take the rook. Take. King g5. Game over. If king f7, king f5, we have a typical situation. The king is opposite. The other guy is king. Wherever the king moves, you go the other way, hence shown by the green and the blue arrow. If you go left, I'm going to go diagonal right. If you go right, I'm going to go diagonal left. To get control of the queening square on f8, king e7, king g6. And we're coming in with this and this. Check. King here, control the queening square. We're getting a promotion. Back to this point, rook f7, what a brilliant move. Move 134, guys. Carlsen just doesn't stop playing. King d8, f5, attack the queen, queen g1, knight g7. In this position, Nepo resigned on move 136. Now what happens? There's just no way to get out of the checks. If you've thrown a check, the king hides anyway. Behind the rook and the knight, you're going to force it home with e7 check. There's no check here, so play a move, check. You're going to get a queen, but you take, control, f6. Let's go knight h5, that's cool. Force it home, game over. What a game. This game was just so long, ridiculous, 136 moves. Carlsen takes the victory, it's move 6. It is game 6, I mean, of the World Championship match. 3.5, 2.5. Check out this brilliant video featuring Alireza Firouzja, the youngest 2800. World number 2, just behind Carlsen. Firouzja could be a future world champion candidate. However, if you want something more specific, here's Firouzja playing a brilliant game in the Caro-Kann with the black pieces.